Thank you for joining me on another part to my series in Transformation We Trust. This week, I'm talking about the great work, the dark night of the soul, spiritual awakening, quarter life crisis, midlife crisis, transformation, the hero's journey, whatever you want to call it. This is the moment in time where you awaken to the fact that perhaps you've been on a treadmill that you don't want to be on anymore. Perhaps you're experiencing a season in your life that you are finished or complete with, but can't help but continue on in some sort of loop. Perhaps things have shifted around you to the point where it has become unbearable, or that you feel as though you are coming undone, or that the waves are crashing over you faster than you can catch your breath. And coming to this place is bittersweet, but sweet in the sense that once you recognize it, you can really partner with it. You can really understand that many have gone through this before you and many will continue to go through this after you. And this is a part of the journey. This is a part of the grand path. And this isn't for the faint of heart, and you get through it. So thank you for joining me, and let's get into it. So as I said, I use the term dark night of the soul, and I'd like to say that I first came to reckon with this a few times in my life, but every time more consciously. And if you've listened to my story, the part 1 and part 2 at the very beginning of the podcast, you will have heard some of this, but I came to it in my teens. I came to it again when I went to do my undergrad, and specifically in courses on sociology, communications, understanding political science. All of those areas sort of led me to this understanding of, hold on, okay, it feels like there are systems in place that sort of create deeper confusion or teach us things that maybe don't really feel in alignment. I loved learning Weber's ideas of, being a bird in a cage, but, the cage door is open and we kind of choose to be caged a little bit until we awaken to the fact that we can leave it at any point. So I had this understanding that I didn't like the way things were going, that there was grander control mechanisms or systems in place that really, didn't make it easy for people to see their power, see their ability to transform, see that they could get out of loops and cycles. And then again, it wasn't something we necessarily learned. This part of the journey is definitely something that you have to come to on your own. And it's sort of mysterious in the sense that it requires you to let go of what you thought was your reality and maybe embrace a limbo for a short period of time to then grab on to the next chapter or the next season of your life in a way that more consciously creates what you're looking for. But the breakdown is a necessary part, and it's really, really uncomfortable. And so I had multiple moments in my life where I came to this. Another one being when I first moved out of my family of origin home and in with my partner, and just went from like a family of 4 people down to 2 people, and really being, faced with the fact that life had changed and shifted tremendously. And I really didn't consider that. I was sort of the type of person to just keep go, and not really take stock of the effect that change might have had on me. So that was one of my bigger sort of awakenings to that, where I can honestly say I really felt a depression or a compression season. And then getting pregnant with my son, my first son, was another moment. This was like planned. It was intentional. But again, I was just so excited to hit the ground running with life, to be a grown-up, to get into the stream of what I thought adulthood meant, that I really, really rammed through and ran at life full steam. And contemplation, was something that I got to if I had time. Spending time with myself and really investigating what I wanted and what was behind the reasons why I wanted what I wanted wasn't really something I attended to. So the slowdown period after like big events like weddings and childbirths, there's this moment of like high highs and then stillness afterwards, and sort of the celebration hangover kicks in, and you're like, okay, what next? What does this mean? How have things shifted? Let's take stock. And I think I experienced a bit of a season of postpartum depression and really an identity shift or crisis, whatever you want to call it, around what it meant to be me and what I was letting go of to become the version of me now, what I was being blessed with, obviously, but I really didn't understand the tremendous amount of responsibility. I knew it, but I also just thought you took it on. You just do it. You walk forward, you have kids. It was just so ingrained that I didn't question it. And so, simple things like just being able to get up and go and not plan a feeding, a diaper change, a packing of a bag, a change of outfit, another diaper change, an hour worth of things just to get out the door. I really took for granted as a teenager, I would just grab my purse and go. So these things were quite interesting to really be aware of in this new role. And some of it felt deeply restrictive. And I say that with such honor because I completely love and enjoy being a mother to my sons. But I'm going to be real. There are parts where you may not fully get the gravity of the shift you're going through. And for those of you who have had children, you might resonate with this. People tell you, it changes your whole world. And you're like, yeah, duh. I'm going to have a kid. Obviously, it changes my whole world. And then when it happens, you're like, oh, you're forever changed. You're forever different. They said this in part 1 or 2 of my story, your heart is now externalized in another being, and you're so vulnerable from that point because the pain that this other being experiences is so intimately linked to your heart that you feel it all. And so that was a huge shift, and that was a big shift in terms of even regulating my own hormones, my own emotions, my understanding of what self-care looked like, my understanding of what higher self looked like, faith, understanding of having faith that I could raise a child and they would be safe, but that also if something happened, I'd be able to handle it. All of these things, these big, big, big gravity, weighty, gravitas type, emotions really come to the fore. So I experienced that, I would say around 2012. And there were a few more moments. I experienced a marriage completion, and again, walking away in that manner really was another reality check of just what it feels like to shift and change and, move my chess piece on the board and feel the whole board shift again around me to accommodate this choice point and this pivot point, and then have a new launch moment of what that meant for my life. And so every time I've gone through this, I've certainly come out with a deeper understanding, more appreciation, more strategies, more tools, more of an understanding who I am, more of an understanding of what truly matters to me. But in the midst of the shift, it feels real dark sometimes, and it feels real scary to let go of everything you thought was firm and solid, and to sort of wager that up for something brand new that you don't know what's coming yet. So this can come at different times for people. I experienced yet another one when I shifted from what I thought was the pinnacle sort of my career and my role to realize, oh, wait, the more I get to know myself, I have more that I want to do. I have more desire. I have more of myself that I've uncovered, and realized that actually some of the things that I chose before this state were coming from maybe areas of lack or areas of programming of where I thought I had to be. And again, never not grateful for the experiences I had, never not grateful for going back to school and getting my master's as a single mom and really setting my sights on becoming a professor in post-secondary education. And I just have always wanted to teach. That's been very much in my core. I've always wanted to teach, and I've always wanted to help, and I've always wanted to share. And I've always felt that any knowledge that we could get that furthers our existence, our joy, our happiness should be shared. We all should have access to this. And my last sort of few years have taught me that while this is true, everybody is entitled to their own journey. And really the most we can do is help people understand how much they're worth, what the possibilities are, that they have it within themselves to succeed at it, and that they have the autonomy to choose for themselves. And any limitations we may, think we should put on other people is absolutely not true. So in a convoluted way, I've come to understanding a few things. To understand that when transformation comes knocking, you can partner with it or you can attempt to avoid it. I've come to learn that sometimes depression comes along with change and transformation because it's a deep call to stillness and a deep call to come inside, to go inward, to take all the energy and focus that you would normally place outward and turn it inward so that you can become acutely aware of the transformation that's going on within you. I've come to understand that when this starts, there are many moments when you think it might be over and you find out there are more and more layers to peel back. And yet at the same time, sometimes we can get used to the spot we're at in terms of healing and transformation. And we also need to be prepared to leave the cave or the cocoon and go back out into the world again. And within this transformation coming knocking, it can come upon you in a slow creep where you just start to notice you lose interest in things, or things don't feel right anymore, or you just don't have the energy or zest for certain aspects of life that you used to. You don't find things that you used to find entertaining worth your energy anymore. You don't find that the things you like to eat, you want to eat anymore. You find that in some cases, you slowly disconnect. And it can also come in the form of a full-blown breakdown where you have a nervous system breakdown, or where you're running so fast and your body literally says nope, and you're called inward quite abruptly. Again, in the slow creep one, or this, once we experience this feeling of disconnection, at least I felt this deep apathy for what was going on around me, and almost not a giving up, but I would ebb and flow in and out of feeling as though I didn't understand a point or a purpose. And this for me was a really, really deep exploration, because I was starting to come away from anything that had meaning aside from my partner and my kids, the people I loved. And even then, I only had a certain amount of energy for that as well. But I think when you're conscious of it, you can at least partner with it in a way that you don't lose there's not a full unraveling where it feels like I'm not even attached to this reality. That is so weird. What? And I say that in a way that attached to this reality in the sense that I don't emote in the same way of despair, but I also don't emote in the same way of excitement. There's just a complete apathy, I would say. So in this, it was accompanied for me by identity disillusion. And when I understood that there were grander cycles that were partnering with this, that this is a grander cycle of change, it really did help me ground into the fact that there are parts of me that are constant and unchanging, and it signaled me to start to look at those pieces. And then the work began in terms of undoing what wasn't me, like undoing what was the not self, undoing the programming, looking at experiences that I was still carrying with me in my metaphorical backpack, all of the things that I had not released, forgiven, ways in which I continued behaviors, beliefs, or programs that really weren't serving me and that really weren't mine to begin with. Sometimes we take into our psyche the voice of someone else because in the moment we were triggered that this is really important information to understand, whether it be for our survival, our safety, our keeping a job, our keeping a relationship, our saving face, our peacekeeping. And we program this in, and it becomes something that sits in our subconscious, which our subconscious isn't necessarily, it's not conscious, it's not in the light of awareness. So it's not discerning on when we play this or why we would play this tape or loop or program. It just sort of happens and shows up to the surface. And the subconscious is really incredible in the sense that if we are in a stressful situation, it can take over. If we are driving and we start to lose control of the car, our system kicks in and we're able to go on this sort of autopilot program that's programmed for our survival. However, some things get caught in that programming that really aren't necessary anymore. They were from a different time when we were less conscious. They were programmed likely during our childhood. I've said this in past podcasts, but up until the age of 7, we're in mostly a theta state where we're just recording experience, recording information. We're just soaking it up like a sponge. And sometimes when we come back to the programming as a conscious adult, we realize, oh, well, that actually isn't so scary. And oh, that rule doesn't actually apply here. And oh, I took that on because this particular person really preferred that way of being, and I actually don't need to do that. So this is where the great work starts, and you begin to notice your inner narrative. Like I remember the first time really coming to terms with, I was in the shower washing my hair and coming to terms with the inner narrative, the loop that had been going on. I was coming to terms with how much chatter was in there, the type of chatter, the type of talk, the type of self-talk I engaged with, the way in which I would pump myself up, the way in which my ego would speak, the way in which my soul would subtly nudge, my intuition would hint, my vision would provide, intuitive pictures and hits. I started to understand, when I did something that wasn't in alignment or wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go in my conscious mind, where my subconscious would kick in a way of speaking to myself that really created more constriction as opposed to more expansion and support. And so coming to that was really at times horrific, and other times really, really illuminating. And so I began to look at my language and the way I spoke about things and sort of editing as I was going. And at times I would have thoughts or ego come in and sort of look at it like, well, you shouldn't have to edit everything you're saying. You should just be able to live. So I was really getting caught between understanding impulsivity, understanding what organic reaction looks like, understanding what choice looked like, understanding what nuance and discernment looked like. So I went from really, what is the bare response, that my knee-jerk response, and really becoming the observer and watching what naturally came up. And for a while, I really wanted to just let that be because I really didn't want to layer in more control over top of my system. I have an aversion to control, and I really wanted to see, well, where is this coming from and why? And so I allowed myself to feel, and I really dug in and looked at all the aspects where I had the impulse to respond in a certain way. And then through that observation, I was able to make assessment of where this was coming from and what was the deeper root behind each one of these responses, and slowly reprogram what my preferred response would be given my now conscious awareness of what I'm looking to create, which is a huge undertaking. It's an ongoing process. It is the great work of coming to the awareness, as I said in the last podcast, that you are the architect and you are the designer, and you get to start designing your conscious and subconscious in a way that creates the optimal experience for you. And there are moments within, your journey where you might take on a more spiritual perspective. And as I said in the last podcast, I believe spirituality isn't the same as religion. It isn't the same thing. It's more coming to grips with how you understand the part of you that exists with a higher perspective, your aspirational self, and how you bring that aspirational self into your now. And so understanding what my goals, visions, what the higher version of me, when I could experience the version of me that felt really expanded and in love, and that, the version of you that could be there for someone and have the most compassion to be able to listen to, and then also be that version for yourself. What would that version want out of each scenario? If I had all the abundance in the world, all the energy in the world, all the resources in the world, what does that version of me look like and feel like? And it feels really good and expanded to be in that version. How can I be in that version more and more? And what trips that version up? What gets me out of alignment with that version? That's what my great work started to become. And I started to understand how to get into alignment with that a little more, what that version was. But in the beginning, I really did look to different communities. And one of the things I looked to was the spiritual community, which is wonderful for learning, wonderful for, growth and self-help. But then at the same token, there's some spiritual egoism or some areas within the spiritual community that can also throw you off in terms of having certain expectations of being positive all the time. And that's where I started to really understand about, this idea of toxic positivity or spiritual bypassing. Like, there is the idea of a spiritual ego. Like, at each level, you really do need to become acutely aware of what part of you is motivated by this, and is there still control dynamics, or is there still programming? Is there a loop that you're jumping back into? And so for me, I really came to terms with understanding how the difference between bypassing and consciously choosing. And bypassing for me was when I'd prefer not to look at something and I'd stuff it away or stuff it down. But conscious choosing could be an interruption in a patterned behavior, choosing a new choice in that moment and moving forward with it, rather than allowing an unconscious loop to continue playing out and continue pulling me in out of alignment. And so it's not looking to only look at the good, but certainly take in all the information and use the embodied power I have to choose a new perspective, choose a new choice, pivot in a different direction. And once I have a clear vision of what that looks like for me, knowing that it will transform, morph, and change over time, I could give myself the latitude and the compassion to know that I'm trying my best. I'm living my life to the best abilities I can in this moment. I have a grander vision. I'm walking in that vision. I'm holding my alignment where I can. And anytime I slip out of it, it's okay. I just come right back. And something else I've learned on this quest, so to speak, was that anytime I become hard on myself, shame myself, negative self-talk, I become contracted in that moment. And I just spend more time out of alignment, which is okay. But I have to be real with myself about it. Is it creating the feeling that I want? Not necessarily. And so another leg of this was looking at control dynamics, righteous anger. There was a while where I really didn't want to feel anger. I really looked at anger as being the problem for me. And I thought the antidote was really analyzing and not necessarily feeling my feelings, but analyzing and having a plan, or having a plan to deal with emotion in a way that was more calculating, I suppose, than embodied. And that was another step in this work, was really to understand that cognitive understanding of feelings and feeling and processing feelings are two different things. And so I really began deeper work of embodying and really going through the feelings as they came, but not necessarily attaching to them. So when I first started this, all kinds of stories would come up, and it was beneficial to look at them. And then it got to a point where I'd looked at them enough to understand when I was holding on to a story longer or adding additional chapters to a story, or the story became so important that the residue of the emotion or experience was holding on longer than it needed. And then for a while I played with not needing stories. So when an emotion would come up and I would feel the impulse to analyze it and go in with my little microscope or my little magnifying glass and start tweezing through and combing through it, I realized that I was feeding that energy a little more than I needed to. And no doubt, in the beginning, definitely, I had to look at some of these things. I had to look at them to address the root. But there came a time where I didn't need to spend as much time in the healing aspects, where I could look at the scenario, look at what was coming up and what was triggering for me, sit through it, feel the emotion through it without bypassing, and when I was ready, get back on the highway and keep going. And so these are some of the things that I've learned doing this work. And what I think is really interesting is that whatever's happening on the micro level with the individual is happening on the macro level. And there's no other time that I understood that more than right now. And it's like we are all going through a dark night of the soul, awakening to the up in the air nature of the world right now. And I'm recording this in 2022. And so what we thought was very solid about our experience and what we thought was very true forever, we're coming to find out is not. And what we thought we had solved and what we thought we had surmounted and what we thought we knew about the world, the environment, nature, we're coming to find out that it is not always the way we've been told, and it is not always the way we thought it was. So we're in a moment of tremendous upheaval and change. And it feels to me as though we are all the collective understanding of what we're experiencing here together is going through its own dark night of the soul. And what that has done is triggered many people into their own awakening, dark night of the soul, spiritual awakening, transformation, midlife crisis, any point life crisis. It's triggered waves of people into this. And so when anything like that happens, we feel the collective experience on top of or in tandem with our own experience. So not only are many of us feeling the shift internally, we're feeling the shift externally, which makes it all the more profound, where it's like being sandwiched in these energies, steeped in them or marinating in them. So sometimes when you're going through this, give yourself a little grace in knowing that sometimes the energy is just thick around you and it's not just completely you. And so the collective could be triggering this in people. But why is it so important to come to this? Why is it so important to do this work? And for me, I've come to the understanding that it's so important because if we aren't satisfied with our existence, then that's a deep call to change. Otherwise, we will continue walking out the programs and the loops, like well-worn bike paths or well-worn paths in the road that we don't want to be walking. And once inertia is created and momentum is created in a particular direction, it takes conscious effort to switch. It takes conscious effort to change, which is why, neuro-linguistic programming, hypnosis, conscious habit forming are so important to this part. And that's when the work begins. And that's, when we're wanting to give up, or it's feeling like, I don't know if I'm going to see any changes. This is when we're laying the seeds and we're laying the groundwork for a new foundation, but the structure hasn't fully formed yet. And so if you're in this space of really reckoning with or rediscovering what you want to get out of life, this is where the work begins. And reassure yourself you're in it. You're sort of locked and loaded into the roller coaster. This is the point where you look at the person beside you and you realize they're not lifting up the seatbelt for you to get out. You're locked in. You're going on the Behemoth or the Leviathan. I'm in Canada, so these are Canada's Wonderland rides. But what's incredible about this is that you get to start a new chapter. You get to look at all the old programs that were running in your life. And as I said, with this subconscious programming, the subconscious programming, the processor of your subconscious is like millions of times more powerful than your conscious programming and your conscious processor in your brain. And so 95% of the time, unless we're getting really good at being present and in the now moment, our subconscious mind is running the show. And whenever you've got programmed in there is attracting in what you're bringing into your life. So if you're in the habit of doing certain things during the day, that's going to be the makeup of what your life is, right? So it's so important to look at the programs running and decide, well, what am I looking to reprogram? What do I not want in here? What can I make space for? What version of me attracts the things that I actually want? What can I create from this life? And how can I become passionate again? How can I know what I truly want? The version of me that's healed and doesn't do things for people pleasing or doesn't engage in activities because I no longer need the accolade for it, or doesn't need a certain title because really I've found that I just want to love my family, experience joy, experience whatever. Some of the top things for me, traveling is so important to me, right? And I realize that, but now more than ever, I've come to this. And so knowing what you truly want and living a life that you want is so incredibly important. And when you wake up to this, it's like enlightening. It's wonderful. It means you get a shot at it. If you didn't wake up to this, you wouldn't know it was even possible. Waking up to this means that you are shifting what you thought was possible. Something that was outside of your realm of possibility now gets to shift, and you get to open up to what is possible. And the more you can peel back the programming and peel back your expectations of what it's supposed to look like, the more room you make to be wowed and to be taken out on a date by the universe, let's say. So, are you avoiding changes? Are you happy and grateful? Are you enjoying your life? And if not, dig in. Start to look at this. You are the captain of your ship. There's this parable about somebody waking up on a ship, and they're in the bottom part of the ship, and luckily they woke up from a dream, and they come up to the upper deck, and they look around and they don't see anybody. They don't see anybody at all. They look for the captain and there's no captain, and they slowly awaken to the fact that they are the captain. And thank God they haven't, crashed into anything yet, but they've just been going in circles over and over again because nobody's been steering. And once you come to that conclusion that you are the captain of the ship and you get to consciously co-create, your evolution, your change happens so much faster. Because now you're conscious of it. You get to choose it. You get to set your compass and decide where you desire to go based on the version you are now, not the version that programmed the programs in. So once you start this work, you will connect up with your inner guidance system. And this is like the hero's journey for the first time consciously, or once again for an up level. I've come into this journey a few times consciously now. And this becomes really when the game of life, the work is the work. And at times you can feel like it literally is the work. You're sweating, you're, grinding through it sometimes. And it's really just working against your own programming. And then at a certain point you flip over, and I said this in the last podcast, from survival to thriving. And then it becomes a game. Then it becomes fun. Then you become the worthy sort of opponent, and you're getting to play ping pong with life or tennis with life in a way that you really feel proficient at what you're doing. And that's exciting. And that can start like at any time it's not my place to tell people what their journey is going to look like. I'm just sharing mine because I hit a few bumps in the road, and what helped me the most was knowing that this is a process, that it does take time, that you're always on your purpose, you're always on your path as long as you continue with that perspective. And everything that you come up against is just more learning, more information, more intel, more experience. And even the stuff that seems to be uncomfortable, your future self, your more expanded self looks at that and finds it very endearing. Like, think back to your first puppy love, your first love, and your first heartbreak. And now you can look at it as so endearing, right? But at the time, it probably ripped you in two. And we get like that with age and wisdom and experience. We get to review old pains and wounds and see them as just part of the beauty of being here. And so I want, if anything, to pass on that feeling that whatever you're going through, at one point you will look back on it and be in complete and utter admiration of the version of you that made it through, and that really got to become the captain of your own ship, or the architect of your own life, and really design this thing through doing the work of excavating, uprooting, and leveling out your foundation of how you want to experience things going forward. This one was a little longer than the other ones. Thank you for joining me. Again, I truly, truly appreciate you connecting with me and spending your time with me. If you haven't checked me out on Instagram, I go by the handle Femyst, Femmyst. And I wish you just the best day, and dig in, folks.